Honestly, it's tough. Every part of the business is me right now. I'm the packager. I'm also the creator.
You weren't the first person with the curly tip locks. Something about you creatively separated you from whoever would be that competition.
All it took was that $200. That's all it took. I haven't boosted a post really since.
What is the ultimate goal for you and your platform?
Really, it comes down to...
Well, welcome back to another episode of Wealthy Creator Podcast. I am your host, Justin Berry, and today I got a good one today. I got a friend of mine. It's going to be a really awesome podcast and a listen today. So I want y'all to tap in. Today, my guest is Ricol.
How y'all doing?
I know her as Jazz. So you all are going to hear me say that name. And just let me, really quick, I want you all to understand Jazz is a part of the Wealthy Production, Wealthy Way team. She is all those crispy audios that you all hear when you all listen to the podcast. It's all her cleaning it up, making it perfect. She is our way of being able to post every single day on audio platforms for all of our podcasts. That's everything from this Wealthy Creator Podcast to Ryan Pineda's Wealthy Way. So, kudos to you for being able to handle that, get that done. I really think one thing that we can pride ourselves on in Wealthy Way as a production team is the amount of quantity that we put out on every platform.
Yeah.
And you play a big part of that. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you hold that whole audio experience down. So again, I tip my hat to you and everything that you're doing.
Thank you. Appreciate
How you doing today though? Everything good?
Good. Yeah. It's a good day.
Yeah.
Good day to be alive.
I hear you. I wanted to have you on though, Jazz, because not only are you a part of our team, and we're going to get a little bit into everything that you do as far as how you prepare and how you work out on that side of things, mm-hmm. but you also have your own brand. Yeah. Right. And it's one of those things where I've had the opportunity to see it grow.
Yeah. And from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so doing that, I want our community here in the Wealthy Creator community to understand that it is possible.
Absolutely.
Right. And I want them to know that with time put in, with work ethic, really believing in the brand and in the product, mm-hmm. they too can experience some of the same successes that you've seen.
Yes, definitely.
All right. So tell me, Jazz, I'm gonna go right into it. How many times have you thought about quitting in your content creation process?
I would say there's been, that I can think about, at least twice.
Really?
Yeah. I've been in this for, I would say, 2 years now. So probably once per year, yeah.
So what influenced that? What made you, think about giving up on what you were trying to create?
Mental health. Mental health is a big thing. And for me, I was never in this space. Growing up, I was very introverted and I never really put myself out there. So putting myself out there to the world, because our world now is like social media. So it's taxing. No,
absolutely. It's funny because I think that, believe it or not, most creators that I've been around and I, working side by side with Ryan Pineda, I've had the pleasure of being around a lot of different creators.
Yeah.
Most of them are introverted. And so there's a theme going here and really a pattern that I'm seeing from most people that see success on these platforms. Yeah. Most of them are private. A little shy, a little awkward, a little uncomfortable, right? That is most cases. I mean, even for me, myself, this wasn't something I ever planned on doing. I've always loved being behind the camera and creating for other people. And so having the opportunity to do that now is weird. I was telling a story on the previous podcast with Kyle. It was my first time getting a negative comment.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so although I've experienced it over and over again with creators that I worked for, this was the first time that it came in on my page.
Right.
And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, how do I respond to this? Right.
Yeah.
And I remember telling myself okay, Justin, you've responded to almost every comment that comes in because I'm new to it. I'm not it ain't like it's millions of comments coming in. So I can do that. Right. And for me and what I teach, part of, growing your platform in your community is understanding that you need to be communal. And need to be social. Don't forget the social part of social media. And so I encourage people to comment back when they can and use those comment sections to continue to grow the community. I never really taught them how to deal with the negative.
Yeah.
Because I've always taught that I don't care what the comment is, positive or negative, is good for your platform. Yeah. So I was sitting there, I was like, man, what do I say to this guy? Right. And I was like, don't be like rude, right? Don't be harsh. Don't be, because you're going to regret it. I knew I would regret it if I said what I was really feeling when I read it. So I didn't respond until a little bit later, but I just go, man, your page is private. That's all I have on, right? Like, because that was the nicest thing I could think of saying, right? So I understand what that meant. And I actually took that moment to think about what mental health and how that can have an impact on you as you're going through this process, especially when you start to see growth. Tell me how you overcame the challenge of, the mental health aspect.
So for me, it was really about balance. I had to take days off from social media. Like, when I first started and when I first got into it, I was so consistent that I was every day, posting every day and sometimes multiple times a day. And it started to like wear and tear on my mental. So for me, as I kind of started getting into the flow of things, my page started growing. It kind of started carrying itself. I was like, okay, I can take a break. I could take a day or two or take the weekend off. And so that's kind of how I navigated through that. You just have to put your mental health first. Like, no matter how bad you want to stay consistent, you want to post every day, you want to post multiple times a day, like, you're not going to be worth much if you're down, you know? So.
No, it's so true. It's so true. And I think there are like strategies that you can use to help kind of, it will help you in your process to give you the breaks that you need. Right. All right. One thing that we teach, in the wealthy way is to be sure to make time for faith, make time for family, make time for your health. Right. And that's one of those, it's an important piece because it is what keeps this thing going. Right. Yeah. All of us can work extremely hard during our hours of here on site because of what we've been able to do off site. Yeah. All right. Like, I know for me, I'm up, early in the morning. I try to get some type of workout in. I get straight to business, right? But at 5 o'clock, I'm checked out. Right. Right. And that doesn't mean, and I want for the people that are listening or watching, understand, checked out doesn't mean that you can completely turn things off, especially when you're in a leadership role. Right. Like, I don't have the luxury of ignoring you all when you all need something, right? Or ignoring Ryan when he needs something or has, whatever idea comes into his head at the moment. Yeah. Right. It's actually a pleasure to be able to do that. Like, I don't take that for granted at all, but I do sometimes have to go, okay, I'll read it and I'll respond when it's appropriate. Right. Right. So if it's something that you need that's urgent, sure, I'm going to get it done to you or get it to you. Right. If it's something that is not urgent, then I can take some time in my response and make sure that I'm focused on whether that be family, health, or my faith. So it's you're spot on with saying that you have to take that time. Otherwise, you start experiencing burnout. Yeah. Tell me what burnout felt like for you.
Oh, man. Burnout for me is like, it's deep. Because I have struggled with depression and anxiety. So for me, I'm obviously getting better at it now. I've been in therapy for a few months now, and I'm heavy in my faith again because I kind of, steered away from it. But the burnout for me was like isolation. Not responding to texts, not responding to phone calls, and just staying in my house. So yeah, but to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying before, having that fear, because it's almost like doubled here, because you want to be consistent. You don't want to let your brand and your business go, to the wayside, but then you're battling with this mental health and this depression and this anxiety, and it's like, it's tough. So for me, advice for you all who are doing this is to batch your content. So that's kind of what got me through, because I had weeks where I didn't want to post at all. And I knew that if I just sat down and made multiple days worth of content and scheduled those posts, that I wouldn't even have to worry about it. Now, obviously you want to get on there and interact with the people in the comments and respond, which I feel like is, for me, it's the least of my worry. Like, I can hop on there real quick and comment back, but as far as creating the content and having to be creative, the batching the content really helped with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that is like the number one strategy when it comes to being consistent, right? Is batching content. And, you know, just a quick explanation of what that even means. When you batch content, you spend a certain amount of time making enough content to last you for a certain amount of time.
Thanks.
Right. So you go into it with the goal of, when I sit down and actually film this session, I'm going to get more than just one piece out of it, or more than just a couple pieces out of it. I'm going to get as much as I can from it, so that then it can be used over an extended period of time, so that I don't have to be filming day to day.
Right. Exactly.
When you started, were you filming day to day?
Yes. Which is, and it's so funny, because when I first started, I loved it. Yeah. Because it was like, oh, it was new, it was fresh, I was in it. So every day I would think of something. For me, it was very niche for me, because I was in the hair like category, hair care, hair tutorials and everything like that. So it was super easy for me to just off the top of my head be like, okay, I'm going to do this hairstyle, or I'm going to teach people how to moisturize, or whatever the case is. So yeah, when I first started, it was day to day. And I'm going to tell you, it would take like a good 2 to 3 hours out of my day just to like think of something, film it, edit it, and then like put it out, and then interact with the people while it's still fresh. So yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. Anybody that's trying to do it day to day, if you're seeing success doing that, kudos to you. Yeah. Because I don't know anybody that really is really good at the day to day, unless they're just being the content. Right. And there's this saying where it's like, don't make content, just be the content.
Exactly.
Those individuals are just being filmed on their day to day process, and they have, I guess you can say, an exciting enough life to where their day-to-day is good content. Most of us, that's not the case, right? Like, you don't care to see me at my computer, or, you know, sitting there looking and reviewing videos, right? That's not, that's not entertaining enough content for me to do that. But there are people that have lives that do have that capability. So that's a little bit different. But those that are making, either direct to camera content, or, even doing a podcast, that's trying to do a podcast every day, right? Like I don't know too many that are successful at that. But yeah, so back to batching, right? I know for me, I don't necessarily batch, right? I go with what is available, but I'm also doing a podcast, which has helped save me the time of having to do that, right? Because I get to sit with an individual for an hour, hour and a half. And from that, I can get a lot of shorts from it. Exactly. So that's one cheat code if you're trying to figure out how to make the most of your time and get the most out of the content. It really is this style of podcasting or communication. And this can be done. It doesn't have to be like an official podcast, right? Like you could have been on Zoom today, sitting across from me, and we just talking, or I could have got you on the phone, had a conversation with you for an extended period of time, and just filmed myself. Right. So there's ways of kind of, finessing and kind of figuring that part out. But, podcast has been a really good cheat code for people to try to figure out how to be consistent. But I know for Ryan Pineda, for example, who's busy, he's running 8-7-figure companies. Him being that busy means that I only have a certain amount of time to film with him. I mean, I have to make the most of it. So what he does is he schedules out one full day and basically a half a day where he can film podcasts or anything else that needs to get done. So within that time, I go, okay, we got 2 podcasts scheduled for Monday. And then the rest of that time, we're either going to film ads, direct to camera, or, whatever kind of short that we would do. Right. All right. Then Wednesday will come. All right. And he's like, all right, I got a half a day to do something. What needs to get done from there? So when we figure out what needs to get done from that point, what we do then is go into, all right, he's got this amount of time. Let's make sure we get these shorts. Let's make sure he films these ads. And let's make sure that we schedule or plan for whatever needs to come next as far as our content. And that's him batching, right? Yeah. Because the other days of the week, he's either working on a business, or he's golfing. Yeah. Right? And now we're filming golfing. So it's like, no matter what, that's part of him being the content at that point. So there's a lot of ways of kind of getting creative and doing that, right? But I encourage people to figure out a schedule for themselves. Yeah. Right? Like, don't be the individual that's like, I'll film when I have time, because you'll never film. Right. Because you'll never have time for what is filming. what makes more sense is to go, okay, I'm going to block out this amount of time in my schedule, and this is when I'm gonna get it done. And it's what you're talking about. So do you have a preference of time or day when you want to film, where it's like better for you to film?
Yeah. So for me, especially like being in like the beauty and like the hair care, I like using the natural light. So I'm up normally by 8:30, sometimes a little earlier. And I'll use my morning really to just get it out, knock that out because I have so much to do in the day. Knock the filming in the, the creative aspect of it out first. And then I kind of.
So she wakes up creative. That's what she said, hey, telling y'all.
I have to, because if I don't knock it out, I will like get distracted just with everything that goes on in my day. Because I am a mom of a 4-year-old. So that is like obviously priority. He comes first. So if I can wake up before him and get the filming and all the creative stuff done, it works best for me too. Like, especially being someone who has anxiety, if I'm in the middle of creating and if I'm in the middle of filming and there's other things pulling at me and a little person pulling at me, it's like, it gets to me. So yeah, definitely morning time for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what's important for any new creator or even a current creator that's trying to figure everything out. It's important to find out your time, like what makes sense. For all of y'all that listen to or watch the Wealthy Investor podcast with Brian DeVilla as the host, one of the things about him is that if we don't get it done in the mornings, later on, it's like he gets into that feeling like, I just don't feel like doing this.
Yeah. Nope.
And it reads. It's real. Right? Like
it's real.
You can see it. You can feel that. It comes across in that video. And so, yeah, I believe everybody does have that moment, right? Now, obviously, some creators become, as you grow in the space and you get your reps in, it gets a lot easier to do it anytime.
Right.
But for a lot of people starting, it's important to find that, that time and day. I want to go back, though, because we didn't really get into the start of it all. So I'm going to go back and I want you to tell me first how you started creating content in the very beginning. Yeah.
So for me, like I said in the beginning, like I never wanted this for myself, to like be this influencer. It kind of just happened. So the way it happened for me was I started my lock journey about 2.5 years ago, and I did a photo shoot for it. Something, and I don't know really what it was, but it may have been, now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, my jewelry brand that I had started. And I had started that like 2 years prior to starting the social media stuff. And it just wasn't growing. Like my family members would buy, and like people here and there, or like through word of mouth or recommendations or whatever. So when I started my lock journey, I'm like, man, this could be a way to market that. Because my main product was lock jewelry, like hair jewelry. So I threw an ad behind like 4 images of that photo shoot that I did. Explain what you mean too by you put an ad behind it. So on Instagram, you can boost your posts. And by boosting them, it's essentially like you're turning your post into an ad. It's going to reach more people. You can set how many people you want to reach. And depending on how much money you want to spend, is equivalent to how many people it's going to reach. Yeah. For me, I took like $200 and I split that up in between 4 posts. Those 4 posts were the photo shoot that I did with my locks. Okay. And for me, I think what made me stand out was the locks with the curly ends. Not to say, because a lot of people get it confused that I started this trend of the locks with curly ends. I did not. I didn't. There's many people out there who started, this as well, the locks with the curly ends, but they just weren't sharing it with the world. So that's the difference there. Kill that rumor there, right? Yeah. Kill that right now. So no, I did not start it, but I can say I am maybe one of the first who decided to document it or record it or just share it. The photos that I ended up boosting just started getting traction like crazy. And I mean, I was at like 10K followers within the first week. And I was like, oh, okay, this is real. Like I could really turn this into something. And I did. And that's when I just stayed consistent with it and started being intentional with it, especially when it came to A Designs, the lock jewelry and the jewelry itself. So, yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to share my story.
Okay.
Right. Because Jazz took you all back to the journey of when she started social media. But I remember our initial meet and you were learning to use a camera.
Yeah.
A good friend of ours, Daryl, who is a magnificent photographer here in Las Vegas, he was one of the first creators I met in the city. So we were collaborating and helping produce a podcast at the time. And he had kept mentioning your name. And I just never saw you. So I was like, all right, I don't even know if this person is real. But he kept talking about you and as far as like as another photographer. And then he was telling me that, yeah, I've been kind of teaching her and kind of showing her some stuff that I do. So I go, okay, cool. And it happened to be around this time of like
2016 or
it was like 18. Yeah, it was really, it was about 5 or 6 years ago. But around 2018, we were doing a quote unquote turkey bowl for Thanksgiving. Right? And this is the first time I actually saw who Jazz was. Right? I heard your name a ton of times. And he was showing you how to film like sports, basically, is what was happening.
Yeah, okay.
And we were at a park, and so when he introduced me, I kind of was like, "Hey, Jazz, what's up?" Like that, and I was like, "I feel like I know you already, but I don't really know you."
Yeah.
I was like, "Let me know if I can help you in any kind of way." And at the time, I couldn't help you because I had nothing. Right? Like it was just conversation.
Yeah.
But seeing you like how far you've come from that point now, because Jazz didn't say it, but she's also a magnificent photographer. She does all of our WealthCon events on top of all of the audio editing. So seeing you where you are now has been tremendous growth from that point. And I believe at that point you just had the big curly hair. Like it wasn't locked yet. And so seeing how you've been able to kind of brand that and really document your journey, you know, it's incredible to see. And I told her before we start this podcast, like people that I have like real relationships with, I always remember our first time meeting. And so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because it gives a look at how you can have a journey within just a couple of years.
Yeah.
Then it can be a couple of months where you see a really big upsell.
Yes.
So, you know what I mean? You were working on it, right? You were learning how to film. You know, you were testing and trying all these different things. You did the jewelry, you did all these different type of projects. And now you found kind of like your niche in your home and where you kind of excel and succeed in that space. So it's been awesome. It's been awesome to see. But going back to what you were mentioning too, there's something that me and Ryan Pineda have where we kind of have created like a scale for whether or not we believe people can truly see real success on these platforms. Yeah. Now that sounds arrogant, right? Like what do we know, right? And that's not what it's meant to be, but we just kind of base it on what we've seen work and what we have, you know, and what we see kind of have a harder path to it, right? Yeah. So I want to know if you agree. I'm gonna read off some things that that we judge people on based on, you know, whether or not they can see. One of them is track record. Okay. Right. Figuring out or showing people, especially on these platforms, what you've been able to achieve. Right. And it answers that question, why should I listen to you? Right. Because that is ultimately, the most important part, right? Like you can have project after project. You can have, brand after brand, business after business, and you can see it fail over and over again. But really people are asking themselves is, why should I listen to you? Why are you the expert? Right. Right. So that's number one. The second one is communication. How well do you communicate? Right. And it's funny because like we talked about earlier, most of these creators that are finding their way of communicating are super shy, introverted. Like they don't naturally, like me too. And they don't naturally come off that way, right? Like they're not naturally that type of person, right? They can be in a room full of people and you not know they're there.
Yeah.
Right. But they have worked at how they communicate.
Yeah.
And how they communicate is effective when it comes over on video.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the things, right? Another one is creativity. All right. Finding, do you have enough creativity to do something that makes you unique and separates you from the individual that's doing the same thing?
Right.
It's just like you said, you weren't the first person with the curly tip locks, right? You weren't the first person, but something about you creatively separated you from whoever would be that competition.
Exactly.
All right. So that's another one, creativity. And the next one was network. Are you tied to people? Do you have a good enough network where you can have a community to start building on? And you know, it goes hand in hand. Like, can I learn from you? And then can I collaborate from you?
Right.
Like, that's what the value of the network is.
Yeah.
Right. And so, interesting enough, you have a few different networks, right? Like you can go into the creative space with production, or you can go the other direction with beauty, where you have that network to build upon. So that's one of them. Another one is vulnerability. Like, how vulnerable are you willing to be?
Right.
Right. Are you able to be transparent when it comes to how you present? Right. Like you talked about, you were free enough to talk about anxiety, free enough to talk about depression, free enough to talk about wanting to give up at times. Right. Like not everybody's willing to do it. As crazy as it sounds, right? Like not everybody wants to show that side of themselves, but that is a big part of being really social on these platforms and really allowing people to trust who you are and where you've come in your journey. So vulnerability. The next one is X factor. Everybody always gets kind of hung up on this when we say X factor, because they're like, what do you mean? I got to have what do you mean X factor, right? That is as simple as, what characteristics make you stand out? Are you tall?
Right.
Are you really short? Do you have one arm? Are you missing a toe? Whatever it is, right? Like whatever you're willing to share. For you, it was the curly tipped. It was, and all your other experiences, right? Like, so you were willing to show that and share that, and really, it's the confidence in that is what kind of draws people in. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because I know, most people probably don't know that seeing this. I used to have locks myself. Right. Right. Yeah. And mine were really traditional to what you all will see from any Chicago rapper right now. Right. Yeah. That's just how we wore our hair. I had braids first, and then I went to locks. So my tips were curly. She cut mine off. Right? See, okay. Because that's not the look that, you know what I mean? But I could have kept that, and then we start talking about X factor again. Exactly. So it is what makes you different amongst your peers and your counterparts. So that's what X factor is, right? Yeah. And then we have what we call TAM, right? And TAM is just how big is the audience? Like, what's the possibility of the largeness of the audience, right? Is this a really niche type of industry where the audience will never get big, right? So you will always cap out at a certain, area. And when I look at that, those are like, you have like neuroscientists that study something specific about the brain. Yeah. That audience may not get too big. Then you have like true crime, where I can discuss every type of different crime, and that audience is massive. Right. Right. So there's different things, right? Like, for example, one reason why we went from the Ryan Pineda Show to the Wealthy Way is because the Ryan Pineda Show represented real estate. Every guest was real estate based. Everybody that he talked to, all the subjects that he discussed were real estate. And then it was like, all right, we're starting to see a little bit of a cap, right? Like, because there's other creators that have big audience in real estate that it doesn't make sense for them to go hear him and us, right? Like, we're talking about the same things. Then he started to talk to other entrepreneurs and business owners and people in finance. And now his brand has kind of shifted to where he can talk with all kind of people, right, and base it all back to the business. Yeah. All right. So how big is your audience is what TAM would stand for. Monetization. All right. How well can you turn a view into $1? All right. And we're going to get more into that too, but that's another way that we judge it, right? Are you capable of selling? Right. Because not everybody can pitch something and people support it. Right. I talk about the know, like, and trust all the time. Are you trustworthy enough for people to buy from you? Right. Do you have that ability? Then the next one is commitment. And we talked about that already, right? Are you committed to what you're trying to do and willing to consistently put out the content? Right. You know, and it's funny, right? Like these two last ones, commitment, and then the last one is capital. Those two kind of go hand in hand, right? Because some people have the capital to do it. They're not willing to commit to it.
Right.
And then others are willing to commit and don't have the capital.
Right.
Somewhere in there, there's a middle. Right? Because maybe you don't have what it need, or you don't have the capital that you need to be able to post twice a day on every platform with a social media manager and everything else that we have here, right? Like Ryan spends about $50,000 a month on this team to operate, right? Maybe you don't have that kind of capital and you can't really do it. Right. But you can't be committed to doing what you're doing. You're a solo creator yourself. Right. Like you take those things, you edit those things and you post them. Yeah. Right. And so that is just a commitment. Your capital is being used on boosting a post. Right. There's a lot of people out there that just won't spend that $200 on those posts. Right. Yeah. No matter what they're seeing in revenue. And so it's one of those things where you got to have all of those to be able to really see success on it. Definitely. And we take all of those on a point system and we rate them based on what we see from the creator. Because if I ask you, hey, right now, we will edit everything for you, film in person with us, and give you really good strategy tips on what you're trying to do for $7,500 a month. And you might go, $7,500 a month? That right there either told me capital or commitment. Right. Right? Yeah. Well, then you tell me, what are you willing to put into this? How much are you willing to spend? That's going to tell me where I rate you on that system. Right. And then that system really can be broken down even further to where I get to know, you know, are you for real about this? And do you have what it takes to make it? So you can look at somebody and just check off things right away. And
let me say this too, for anybody who's in the space that I am as like the solopreneur or the influencer, all it took was that $200. That's all it took. I haven't boosted a post really since. Maybe once or twice, $30 here and there. So I would say in total, I haven't spent more than $300 to get to where I am now, you know? Yeah. And besides those boosted posts in the beginning, all the growth has been organic, you know, and it stems into, or it comes from the X factor that you were speaking of. Yeah. Because not all of my engagement was positive. I did have a lot of people on there who was like, oh, those aren't locks. You know, your ends are curly. They're not locks. And even to go into the cap that you were just talking about, it did at a certain point. I did hit a kind of an area of stagnation as far as the growth goes, where I hit 50K and I kind of just sat there for a little bit. Yeah. And I feel like a part of that was because the curly ends, as aesthetically beautiful as it is, isn't widely accepted in the lock community. Like a lot of people, there's a lot of haters, let me just say. A lot of people also don't understand that hair texture plays a big part in the curly ends. Like whether I maintain my ends or not, they would stay curly because it's just my hair texture. Right. So you do get a lot of people who kind of want to judge you on that.
Yeah, no, I think too, and we can go. It's another podcast to talk about just the culture behind it, right? Yeah. Like that's a whole other thing that we can dive into. But I think that's where people need to hear from you. Like it didn't cost me a lot. Yes. Right. No. It cost me way more time.
It was the time and the commitment. Because like I said, I didn't spend no more than $300 to be where I am now. So if that is your worry, it shouldn't be.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so we're clear, Ricol just reached over 100K on Instagram.
I did.
Which I think, you know, you should be very proud of doing that, because it's not easy, especially, you know, it was easy, you know, when everybody was at home and in the shutdown, right? People were making content in their living rooms and then growing followings. But to continue to grow, especially to see a plateau and then grow some more, it's really difficult. And it really takes an understanding of where the ultimate goal is for you to do that, right? now that, you know, your page has grown, you're seeing, you know, results from everything that you're doing and your commitment, what is the ultimate goal for you and your platform?
Really, it comes down to my son. When I really sit and I think about it, kind of using my platform to build wealth, just so he has a different life, a better life, something that I can pass down to him that he can continue to grow, you know, as I get older. And so yeah, it really is to build wealth, just create a different life.
Yeah. So tell the people how you're monetizing it.
So I have a hair brand. I make hair products, Protect Your Crown LLC, as well as we mentioned before, A Designs, the lock jewelry and the just jewelry itself. Yeah, so that's kind of my main focus now, as well as like affiliates and brand deals and things like that. So, which is funny because I don't really do as much marketing for the hair products and the hair jewelry that I should be. And I feel like it's because I'm at a comfortable place now to where people like me, so they just buy. They just buy because they like me. So if you ever visit my page, you won't see too much of anything really salesy. It's just, you'll either see me wearing my lock jewelry or you'll see me in a video using my rose water or using my hair oil, and people in the comments like, oh, where's that? Like, what you using? Or where'd you get that jewelry from? And then I'm plugging myself, you know, pretty much. And that's just how it's kind of worked for me so far. I can't imagine where I would be if I was actually like marketing it and like doing what I was supposed to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're a really good case of not being salesy. Yeah. And I think that's a fear for a lot of people too. Right? You have those individuals that's like, look, every time I get on here, I'm trying to sell something, right? They don't care, right? Like I'm pushing a product because I feel like it's a product that you can, you know, use to really grow. But then there's those individuals like, and I get this all the time in my creator program where, you know, they're asking me, I don't want to feel like I'm salesy and I always I'm like, okay, then don't. But there are unique ways to sell without doing that. Exactly. And that's essentially what you're doing naturally. Or you're being yourself. The consistency will get the views, and then the likeness that you're drawing in then transfers over to be trustful. Right. Because you're not trying to force me to buy something. Like, I know that you're not doing this because you want to make money. You're doing this because this is who you are. It's a part of your life. And I can trust that, right? Like I can feel that, you know, that engagement with you. So yeah, I think that's a really, you know, what you're doing is smart. And what you're doing is also growing your audience before you begin to be the salesperson. Right. Yeah. Right. And I think that community will be so strong that, you know, it'll be very easy for you to you know, to kind of convert over. I find that all the time though, like, you know, there was just a release this past week. We're filming this in the first week of November of Skims partnering with the NBA. All right. And so now they're coming out with male products. Right. And funny enough, I'm like, my wife actually buys Skims. So I already have a trust for what that product will be like. Yeah. Right. So she doesn't necessarily have to sell me. Right. Like I don't need to be pitched. There's previous products that I've seen of theirs that I know I can trust. But even without that, I would have trusted it just because I'm a fan of the NBA. You know what I mean? Yeah. So there's going to be a certain amount of people that purchase those products that have no real like support of Kim at all. Right. Even though she's like the biggest face on the world as far as marketing is concerned, there are men, probably older men, that are just NBA fans that are going to purchase something from there just because of the NBA. Yeah. Right. So they don't have to sell. Right. It's just, I'm collaborating with this, and that's how it's going to work. Right. It's going to make for that good partnership. What you're doing essentially is the same thing, where I'm just showing you who I am as the person, which is earning the trust.
Exactly.
And so it's awesome. Like, I think you're doing really good with what you're doing. I am going to tell you to sell though.
Yeah. No, but that's the thing too, is like, that is very real. Like, getting people to trust you, like when you have a community or you have a big audience, getting people to trust you is big, because I'm proof of that people come to me for lock advice. They come to me for hair care advice. So when they see me using a product, they're automatically like, oh, I need that because I want her result. I want her, the way her hair looks. So I'm going to use whatever she's using. So yeah, that trust aspect is very big, but you are very right. I do need to sell some stuff.
Gotta sell some stuff. Can you just go further in discussing how important it is to establish a strong brand?
Honestly, to come at it from like the most transparent way I can, it's tough. It's tough because I'm doing it all by myself. So when I do choose to do the sales stuff, I'm the packager. I'm also the creator of the jewelry and the maker of the hair products. So I'm having to measure things out, and I'm literally making all of these things. And every part of the business is me right now. So keeping that going is hard. And it's hard to scale because it is just me, and I'm doing every single piece. Everything being handmade and homemade is where I kind of lie my importance of my brands. It falls into that whole trust thing I was talking about. Like, people trust me. So damn, I suck at this.
No, so
y'all gonna have some editing to do.
yeah. No, we'll fix it. But and I think what you're getting at, because I find myself too, like, anytime I have friends or maybe people that I know, or there's just a really, really great brand that I want to support, a lot of times it's a custom piece, right? Like, it's something that they made, whether it's one of one or one of 100. It's something that they put their hands on, right? It's not the, drop shipped from China, garbage quality, right? Like, it really is a piece that they put time and effort in. Yeah. And so it almost makes me feel like it's my duty to support this. Right. Right. Especially when it's someone that you are in some way connected to. Yeah. And so I have found that even individuals that are growing brands online, people can feel that same way without knowing you. Right. Right. Tell me, have you ever had someone approach you and talk like they already know you, even though it's your first time meeting?
Yes. A few times.
Yeah. And that's that feeling, right? Like, I'm getting it now because people are used to seeing me with Ryan. And because he talks so much and has so much content go out every day, people feel like they know you and it's your first time meeting. Right. But that's just trust, right? Yeah. Like, that's you being transparent enough to create these things and care enough about the product that now it's like, okay, I can trust this person, and I get to feel a part of them when I purchase or when I buy. And I stand on that too. I do take it very, very serious when it comes to making the jewelry and making the hair products. Before I even put any of the hair products out, I was testing on myself for weeks to months at a time because I want to sell a good product. Even with the lock jewelry, I will get down to the very end of one of my pieces and not curve the wire the way I wanted it to be curved, and I will completely start it over because I really want the customer to be satisfied and can say that,
oh, there's quality in her work.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I know my wife bought some stuff from you and she said the exact same thing. She was like, oh, this ain't just, this ain't you buying a pack of 100 and then selling it, online. Like, this is real. She's really putting the time and effort in. So it is appreciated from the customer for sure. It should be no brainer. Tell me a little bit, and if you have any type of like tips or advice for individuals when they're trying to recognize their target as far as audience is concerned. How do you go about finding who your audience is?
For me, and I'm big on this, is do what you enjoy doing. Like, just don't try to be somebody that you're not. Stick to what you know, so that you never get burned out. And it was easy for me to find my people because I liked things hair, so I stood with that. And I did get to a place where I was like, man, I'm getting kind of bored. I'm getting kind of bored with just doing the hair things, just doing the hair care, doing the hair videos. So I really sat with myself and said, what else do I like to do? I love fashion. And so I kind of took the lifestyle route with my page and went from just focusing on the hair care to everything Ricol, So stick to doing the things that you love to do. It doesn't have to be just one thing, especially if you're kind of in the space that I'm in. People just like Ricol. They just like me. They want to see what I'm doing. They want to see, the things that I like. So to even add on to that, where this growth came from, that moment where I kind of hit that plateau, was came when I opened myself up more from just the hair and went into showing the shoes that I like and showing the clothes that I like, and even getting on live and talking more, or just talking straight to the camera more, just more personality. So don't be afraid to just focus on the things that you like.
Yeah. No, that's really good, because one thing about understanding your audience is they probably like some of the same things you do if they liked one thing. Right. And so the community that you're building, right? Like, example, the creator community. If these individuals are trying to grow businesses and use social media to help push it, then whatever they're into, I need to know more than just the product that you're trying to sell or more than just the business that you're running. I need to know a little bit about you too, right? And then I get to see, this person, like, there's a group of people now that are interested in this, right? Like, I got people on my one-on-ones where the first 10 minutes is talking about the White Sox, right? The next 10 minutes is talking about, whatever, sneakers, right? There's so many different things that we have found common ground on that it makes it very easy for them to digest my type of content. Right. It is really just about exposing people to that. And then understanding your target audience is more of who will support you when you do have a product to put out. Right. So for you, it's like, all right, if I'm doing hair and beauty, right, they might also like jewelry. Or, if they care about their hair, they care about their beauty, and they like jewelry, they probably like fashion. Facts. Right. And so you decided to kind of implement all of those things and all those pieces into your content to kind of really help your audience, maintain that likable individual in who you are and trust it. Right. And so it's awesome, man. Like, I think you're spot on with what you're saying. I know one thing that's for sure to be true. Being an imposter is difficult. It is the hardest thing to maintain and keep up with, right? Especially if you're only doing it because you're on these platforms. Right. Right. Because people see you outside of that platform too. And they know who you are and who you really are. Right. But it's also like every room that I enter in, I feel like I'm being looked at. So I got to turn it on. And no one should have to live like that. Right. Like, no one should have to deal with that. So I always tell people, talk about the stuff you know. Yes. Do not talk about the things you don't. Nope. Right. Like, I can recite real estate like the back of my hand, but I've never flipped a house. So I'm never going to get on these platforms and talk about flipping a house.
Yeah.
Right. I've intaked the last 3.5 years. I've taken in so much real estate content that I know exactly how to do every little, but I'll never get on these platforms and talk about it until I've done it.
Right.
Right. That's just a part of me not feeling like an imposter. Right.
Exactly.
When it would be very easy for me to do
right.
with how much knowledge I've gotten from, being with Ryan Pineda. So it's really, really important that people understand that. Right. Like do what you know. Or talk about what you know and do the necessary things to make sure that people can trust what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Jazz. So tell me, what do you see as far as like future trends and things that are going on the platforms? Is there something that you're implementing now in your content that, is a kind of new trend or something different than what you've done in the past?
No, I've kind of like stuck to the same like strategy because it always works. It translated from when I was heavy in doing the hair videos to the fashion videos. It all translates the same way for me. So what has worked for me is the trending audios and making content around those audios. Even the music, the trending music. That has been the biggest, where I've seen the biggest growth for me in my page is making those audios as different and creative as I can that matches what I do. And it always works every time.
So how do you go about deciding, like, do you just kind of comb through and find something that you like, or do you make the piece first and then find it? So
for me, is I will set aside, it's crazy. I'll set aside a couple hours. I like to call it studying, where I'll just hop on Instagram and I will go through hashtags and hashtags that are relatable to me and see what other people are using. So for me as a creator, I need inspiration. So I'll go and study and see what other people are doing and see how they're using the audios. And it doesn't even have to be like I can take someone's audio who is working on a car and sit there and think to myself, well, how can I make this work for fashion and hair? And I'll get in my notes and I'll write down some ideas. And so it's a process. Yeah. And it takes a little bit of time, but it always works. Yeah. Every time. When I take more time to like put it together and create it, it works the best.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah. That's great. And I think I want to leave it there. I want people to hear that because this is not by accident. Yeah. You didn't just make a video and blow up and everything is great, right? Like you spend time with it and understanding it, and you still operate a business and you still do, like work for us, in terms of our audio and things like that. So like, this isn't, you're making time for what is important. And part of it is doing your study, what we call the research side of it all, right? So yeah, I think that's really awesome. Jazz, tell people where they can find you, where they can find your products, where they can support you. Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Ricol, Rikcol. You can find my jewelry and my lock jewelry at A Designs on Instagram. That's AIE Designs. And Protect Your Crown LLC on Instagram as well. All of the websites will be the link in the bio. All right, Jazz, I appreciate you for coming. Thank you for taking the time. It's been another episode of Wealthy Creator. I am your host, Justin Bray, and I'll check you on the next one.